So, good morning, everyone. Today we're tackling Chapter 8, Analyzing and Interpreting Qualitative Data. So, before we dive in, I wanted to take a moment to introduce everyone in our group. So, Ms. Jongay-Ipili-Iishmael, Amber Ipili, and yours truly, Christine Hongay. Analyzing qualitative data requires understanding how to make sense of text and image so that you can form answers to your research question. In this chapter, you will learn about the 6 steps involved in analyzing and interpreting qualitative data, preparing and organizing the data, exploring and coding the database, describing findings and forming themes, representing and reporting findings, interpreting the meaning of the findings, and validating the accuracy of the findings. So what are the 6 steps in analyzing and interpreting qualitative data? So first is, it is inductive in form going from the particular or the detailed data. So qualitative analysis starts by examining the individual details like interviewing transcript or observation notes. So these specific details are then grouped based on recurring themes. So the process is inductive, meaning it goes from the small to specific pieces of data to identify larger. So more general themes that emerge from the data itself. So even though the initial data might be diverse in detail, so the goal is to find common threads and create a cohesive pictures that explain the phenomenon being studied. So next is, it involves a simultaneous process of analyzing where you are also collecting data. So unlike traditional research where data collection is finished before analysis begin, iterative analysis allows you to analyze data where you're still collecting it. So as you collect new data like interview or transcript, you can simultaneously analyze previously collected information to identify emerging themes and patterns. So this process creates a loop. The initial analysis can inform what kind of data you look for the next on your collection phase. So next is, the phases are also iterative, meaning you cycle back and forth between the data collection and analysis. So the phases of collection and analysis aren't linear. You can think of them as a loop where you go back and forth between the two. So as you analyze your initial data like interview stories, you might identify gaps or areas that need more information for a clearer picture. So this analysis then guides you to go back and collect additional data from the same participants or the new ones to fill those gaps. So by revisiting participants or collecting more targeted data, you gain a richer and more nuanced understanding of their experiences. Next is, qualitative research analyze their data by reading it several times and conducting an analysis each time. So unlike quantitative data, where analysis might be a one-time process, qualitative data is often analyzed through multiple readings of the collected information. So with each read-through, researchers develop a deeper and more nuanced understanding of the participants' experiences and perspectives. So each reading might reveal new connection, themes, or aspects of the data that weren't apparent before. So next is, there is no single accepted approach to analyzing qualitative data, although several guidelines exist for this process. So unlike quantitative research with its standardized method, qualitative analysis doesn't have a single universally accepted approach. So researchers can draw on various tools and techniques depending on the specific research question. So data type and theoretical framework. So while there's flexibility, it's not random. Researchers use established guidelines and best practices to ensure rigorous and systematic analysis. So the process can be eclectic, meaning researchers might combine different techniques to best suit with their needs. So last is, qualitative research is interpretive research, so in which you can make a personal assessment as to a description that fits the situation or themes that capture the major categories of the information. Qualitative research is interpretive because researchers actively try to understand and explain the meaning behind the data that they collect. So this interpretation is influenced by the researcher's own background, experiences, theoretical framework. So the goal isn't to find the one right interpretation, but to gain a rich and nuanced understanding of the phenomenon under the study. So how do you prepare and organize the data for analysis? So initial preparation of the data for analysis requires organizing the vast amount of information, transferring it from spoken or written words to a type of file, and making decision about whether to analyze the data by hand or by computer. So first is organize data. At an early stage in qualitative analysis, you organize data into file folders or computer files. So qualitative research often involves a massive amount of information from interviews, observation, documents, and etc. So a 30-minute interview can easily translate to 20 pages of transcript. So without a proper organization system, this data can become overwhelming and hinder your analysis. So there is no one size fits all approach. So you can develop system based on data type, participants location, matrix, or table. So next is transcribe data. During qualitative data collection, you will collect text or words through interviewing participants or by writing field notes during observation. Qualitative data often involves spoken words from interviews or written observations. So to analyze this data effectively, researchers need to convert into a computer document, or sometimes researchers might analyze directly from recording or field notes if time is resources are limited. So next is transcription, is the process of converting audio tape recordings or field notes into text data. So transcription remains the key to converting audio recordings or field notes into text data for analysis. So researchers can choose to transcribe themselves or utilize transcription service. So for interview data, professional transcriptionists often rely on specialized equipment. So last is analyze by hand or by computer. So with the popularity of the computer, researchers have a choice about whether to hand analyze data or to use a computer. So the hand analysis of qualitative data means that researchers read the data, mark it by hand, and divide it into parts. So traditionally, analyzing text data involves using color coding to mark parts of the text or cutting and pasting it. Basic features of software programs. So many commercial qualitative data analysis software programs are available today. A recent review of software programs analyzed their features based on 8 major dimensions. So using information from this figure, your basic consideration are to find a program that is easy to use and that will accept both of your text file and your image, that allows you to read and review text and categorize it, and that sorts and find text or image passage easily for your qualitative report. So less frequently, you may be interested in merging analysis compiled by different researchers, importing or exporting your analysis to other software programs, such as exporting to SPSS or importing from a spreadsheet. So first is Atlas. These Windows PC programs enable you to organize your text, graphic, audio, and visual data files along with your coding, memos, and findings into a project. So further, you can code, annotate, and compare segments of information, and you can rapidly search, retrieve, and browse all data segments and notes relevant to an idea, and importantly, build unique networks that allows you to connect visually selected passage, memos, and codes in a concept map. So next is Hyper Research. This program is available for both Windows PC and Mac. So it is an easy use to qualitative software programs that enables you to code and retrieve, build theories, and conduct analysis of your data. So now, with advanced multimedia capabilities, Hyper Research allows you to work with text, graphic, audio, and video sources, making it valuable research analysis tool. So Hyper Research is a solid code and retrieve tool analysis program with additional theory building features provided by a hypothesis tester. So next is Maxoda. This Windows PC program is a powerful tool for text analysis that you can use for grounded theory-oriented or code and retrieve analysis, as well as for more sophisticated text analysis. So it enables you to combine both qualitative and quantitative procedures. The program has a simple, easy-to-use interface of four main windows showing imported text, codes, and coded test segments. So, and text itself. So a unique features is that you can weigh the codes to give a measure of the significance of a piece of coding. So last is Vero. This software program is also for Windows PC. It combines efficient management of non-numerical, unstructured data with the powerful processes of indexing, searching, theorizing, and designed for researchers making sense of complex data. So NVivo offers a complete toolkit for rapid coding, thorough exploration, and rigorous management and analysis.
This is Jongay-Ipili-Iishmael speaking. For today's presentation, I will be discussing this part and the next two slides. So, how do you explore and code the data? The first step in the data analysis is to explore the data, explore the general sense of the data. It is a preliminary exploratory analysis in qualitative research. Exploring data is like getting a feel for what it's all about. You look like it to understand what's there and what stands out. So it's like when you're meeting a new people and you're trying to get a sense of who they are, like that. So the next one is the code data. The further process of analyzing text or images in qualitative research begins with you code the data. So once you've explored the data, coding, it is like organizing it into categories or labels. So it's like sorting your clothes into different piles based on their colors or types. Coding helps you make sense of the data by breaking it down into smaller, more manageable parts that you can analyze more easily. As you can see at the screen, there is a picture there. It is a visual model of coding process in qualitative research. So imagine you are detective solving a big puzzle. So you start by looking at all the pieces, that is reading through text data. Then you break them into smaller groups based on their shapes or colors, that is dividing text into segments. Next, you label each group with a specific clue or detail, that is coding segments of information. As you work, you notice some pieces are similar or don't fit, so you rearrange or discard them, that is reducing overlap and redundancy of codes. Finally, you put them together, the pieces that share the same theme or idea that reveal the bigger picture, that is collapsing codes into themes. So it's like solving a mystery where you start with a lot of clues and end up with a clear understanding of what's going on. So that is the explanation of the picture you see there. Okay, next slide. How do you use codes to build description and themes? So in a qualitative research study, you need to analyze the data to form answer to your research questions. So using codes to systematically organize and analyze your qualitative data, you can build rich descriptions of your phenomena of interest and develop meaningful themes that provide insight into your research question. So the first one is description. This involves detailed descriptions of people, places, or events in your research setting. It is the most easy to start the analysis after the initial reading and coding your data or to identify key elements. The second one is the theme. Themes are the underlying patterns or ideas that emerge from your data. So there are three different types of themes: the ordinary themes, the expected findings, the unexpected themes, the surprising discoveries, and the major and minor themes, the primary and secondary ideas in your data. So the next page, the next slide, rather. It is the layering and interrelating themes. The layering themes builds on the idea of major and minor themes but organize the themes into layers from basic elementary themes to more sophisticated ones. Interconnecting themes means that the researcher connects the themes to display a chronology or sequence of events, such as when qualitative researchers generate a theoretical and conceptual model. So layering and interrelating themes. Layering organizes themes from basic to more complex. Then the interrelating connects themes to show relationships or sequences of events, like creating a theoretical model. So that's it. How do you represent and report findings? So, representing and reporting findings in a qualitative research involves presenting the results of your analysis in a clear and meaningful way. Here's a simplified process. So, the first one, create a comparison table shows differences or similarities between findings. Second, develop a tree diagram visualizes the structure of your themes. Then, the third one, present figures, graphs or charts to illustrate key findings. Then the fourth one, draw a map, provides a spatial representation of your data. And the last one, develop a demographic table, presents data based on participant demographics. So, these methods help researchers organize and present their qualitative data effectively. So that is the end of my report. The next slide will be reported by my co-reporter.
Reporting findings. So this primary form for representing and reporting finding in a qualitative research is a narrative discussion. A narrative discussion is a written passage in a qualitative data in which authors summarize it in detail, the finding from their data analysis. So there is no set of form for this narrative, which can vary widely from one study to another. However, it is helpful to identify some frequently used forms as shown in Table 8. So several of these forms have already been discussed, such as developing description, themes, interconnecting themes. So others are important too, especially in advocacy and participatory forms of qualitative inquiries, such as raising question, challenging assumption based on evidence supplied by the participants, or reflecting on how the participant changed, for example, became empowered, became advocates, became involved during the research. So your decision about which form or forms to use depends on the purpose of your research and the type of the data you have analyzed for your findings. So, consider also the narrative elements that go into a report of your findings. As you make multiple passes through your database looking for description and themes, consider these useful hints. So, first is include dialogue that provides support for teams. State the dialogue in the participant's native language or in the regional or ethnic dialect. Use metaphors and analogies. Report quotes from interview data or from observation of individual. 5 is write in vivid details. And lastly, specify tension and contradiction in individual experiences.
So now, let's proceed on. How do you interpret findings? Interpretation involves making sense of the data or the lessons learned as described by Lincoln and Guba 1985. Interpretation in qualitative research means that the researcher steps back and forms some larger meaning about the phenomenon based on personal views, comparisons with past studies, or both. When interpreting findings in research, it means you're trying to understand what the data means. It's like figuring out the lessons learned from what you've studied. In qualitative research, interpretation involves stepping back and thinking about what the data tells you about the topic. You might compare it to what others have found before or share your own thoughts about what it means. This interpretation is usually written in a section of the study called discussion or conclusion. Interpretation or amplification in here section includes first a review of the major findings and how the research question were answered. It's about what you have discovered and how you answered the question you were asking. Second is personal reflections of the researcher about the meaning of the data. You, as a researcher, share your own thoughts about what the data means. Third is personal views compared or contrasted with the literature. You also compare what you have found to or what other people or researchers have already studied. Next is limitation of the study. It is the problem or things that could have made your study better. So next is suggestions for future research. You suggest ideas for what other researcher could look into next. Next is summarizing findings. Summarize findings. A typical discussion selection begins with a general recap of the major findings. In the discussion section, here start by giving a summary of the main things you found in your study. This might include the going over each question you were trying to answer and explaining what you discovered for each one. It gives the readers a quick overview of what you have found or in your research, which helps them understand the detailed results you'll talk about on later. It's like giving them a sneak peek. Now, next is convey personal reflections. Because qualitative researcher believes that your personal views can never be kept separate from interpretations, personal reflections about the meaning of the data are included in this research study. In the research, it's believed that your own thoughts and feelings plays a big part in how you interpret the data. So, in your study, you include your personal reflection on what the data means to you. The reflection are based on your insights, feelings, and experiences. For example, a researcher talk about him on how learning isn't just about school but also about understanding your role in society. Those personal reflections help give more depth into the research and show how the researcher own perspective influenced their interpretation of the data. Next is make comparisons to the literature. Interpretation may also contain references to the literature and past studies. Similar to quantitative research, the qualitative inquirer interprets the data in view of this past research, showing how the findings may support or contradict prior studies or both. In research, the qualitative research, when interpreting the data, you look at what others studied and have found before. You might compare your findings to what already been written about in a book or articles. This helps show of your results and support what others have discovered. For example, in a study, a young man with a Down syndrome interacts with his brother. The researchers look at what other experts have said about including people with disabilities in a regular school setting. By comparing their own ideas to what already knows, researchers can see how their findings fit into a bigger picture. It's like checking your puzzle piece if it fits into the picture. So next is offer limitation and suggestion for future research. Also similar to qualitative research, the qualitative researcher suggests possible limitations or weaknesses of the study and make recommendations for future research. In qualitative research, here researchers talk about the limitation or weaknesses of the study and suggest ideas for the future research. Limitation could be problems like issues of collecting data or when participants or researchers don't answer all the questions. Suggestion for future researcher might include things like gathering more data or asking different questions. Those suggestions can be used to improve things like classroom practices or to plan for new ways of doing things, like handling violent incidents on a campus. It's like saying, here what could have been better, and here what we could look into next. Next is, how do you validate the accuracy of your findings? To make sure that your findings are accurate, you need to validate them. This means checking if they are credible and trustworthy. Qualitative researchers use different strategies for this, like member checking and triangulation. These methods help them confirm that what you have found is reliable. Researchers must be aware of their own biases. They can influence their understanding of the data. Being self-reflective about their role and personal history helps ensure accuracy. Validating the accuracy of your findings means making sure they're believable and supported by strong evidence so others can trust their result. Qualitative inquiries triangulate among different data sources to enhance the accuracy of a study. The triangulation refers to the use of multiple methods or data sources in qualitative research to develop a comprehensive understanding of phenomena. That is according to patent 1999. Triangulation is the process of corroborating the evidence from different individuals, for example, a principal and a student. Triangulation in qualitative research is like using multiple pieces of evidence to make sure your study is accurate. You look at the informations from different sources like interviews or observations and see if they all point to the same conclusion. By gathering evidence from various places, you can be more confident that your findings are reliable. It's like double checking your work by looking at it from different angles to make sure you get it right. Next is researchers also check their findings with participants in the study to determine if their findings are accurate. The members, one of the member researchers double check if their findings by going back to the participants in the study. They ask the participant if what they found matches their experience. This can be done through writing or interviews. Researchers ask participants if the description of events is correct or accurate, if the theme makes sense to them, and if the interpretation seems fair. It's like getting a second opinion to make sure everything is right. So next is researcher may also ask a person outside the project to conduct a throughout review of the study and report back in writing the strengths and weaknesses of the project. In the external audit, researchers get someone from outside their study to review their work and to give feedback. This person looks at different parts of the research. It writes or talks about what they think are the strengths and weaknesses. They might ask questions like if the findings make sense, if the conclusions are logical, and if the researcher's bias are affecting the results. Auditors typically ask questions such as those mentioned by Swandat and Halpin 1988. For example, Maria, a researcher, worries if her own background might influence her interpretation of her findings about a student's and weapon possession. To make sure her report is accurate and trustworthy, she could ask the students and teacher she interviewed to read her findings and share their thoughts. This way, she can see if her interpretation matches their experiences. Other approaches Maria could use include getting feedback from experts in the field or doing more research to gather additional perspectives. So, next is re-examining qualitative data analysis in the Mother's Trust in Principles case study. Sheldon 2010. To see the steps of qualitative data analysis and interpretation in action, in terms of preparing the data for analysis, we know that the author's transcribe the semi-structured interviews with the mothers and then enter the text into a computer program for data analysis. Then they conducted a line-by-line analysis of the transcripts and met up as a team to discuss each code and to reach some agreement on the codes. The mother trusts in principal case study, the researcher prepared the data by describing interviews with the mothers and inputting the text into a computer program for analysis. Then they analyzed the transcripts line by line and discussed the codes as a team to reach agreement. They refined their codes and grouped them, creating a concept map to visually represent these themes. The study findings were reported in the results sections, focusing on two major themes: the principal attributes and actions. The interpretation of the findings was presented in the discussion section, which included a general discussion, a comparison with existing literature, and implication for principals. IEP meetings and training programs. While limitations and suggestions for future researcher were not explicitly mentioned, the study did address validity by having participants check the accuracy of reported findings through member checking. And that's all for our report. Thank you for listening. Bye.